Alright, well, I'm working on my Mardi Gras, my Seeburg Mardi Gras, and it has these light bulbs on the front that actually make the jukebox look good, and they're called chasers. And basically there's a 5 bulb sequence where the bulbs blink 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and there's a little thing called a 5-bit sequencer that does that. Well, here's the bulbs themselves. I bought these from 1000bulbs.com in Texas, a little American business, and they sell them in packs of 10 for $2.45. So this particular unit takes almost 60, so I bought a bag of 60 of them, which is not that expensive. So I figured when I'm going to do it, I might as well do all of them. All the ones that were bad, I plugged this in and lit it up, and I just basically took a magic marker and highlighted on them, the magic marker, the black one, which bulbs are bad. So as I change them out, all the bulbs that are still good or decent, I'll just use as spares later. But because it's so difficult to get to these bulbs to begin with, and then the fact that you've got to unsolder every single bulb, it's kind of like painting a whole room or just kind of patching the walls. It's easier maybe to paint the whole thing. So that's what I'm doing. I'm going to place all the bulbs in this unit, and here's what they look like. So you can see on the back side there's just 2 soldered joints per bulb. And what I'm going to do here, I'm going to hopefully just be able to reuse the solder. So I'm just going to try, and I haven't tried this yet, my first attempt. I'm just going to try and heat it up and maybe use like a pair of needle nose to pull the wires out and put the new one in. If that doesn't work, I'm going to use my solder sucker. And just to let you know, I bought one of those little plunger type solder suckers, and that was a horrible mistake. Then I went, actually this is like the one thing I do like from Radio Shack. This is a bulb type solder sucker. You plug it in, and it's like a solder iron, and you set this down there, and then you squeeze this ahead of time, and then you let go, it just sucks the solder up into it. This thing works great. So I'll let you know how it works. Just to give you a tip, it's next to impossible to screw up the wiring on this because of the way it's made, but I just went ahead and put a Sharpie on here and put letters to mark the colors of the wires so I could undo this. And I went ahead and I've taken out my first bulb. I don't know if you can see this or not, but this thing it's technically a good bulb, but it's pretty abused compared to the new one and the base of it. So time to see if I can get the new one in without losing the solder. And trying to put the new light bulb in without removing the solder was a bust, to say the least. That was a pain. You need 3 or 4 hands. So I'm heating up my Radio Shack bulb solder sucker here, and I'm going to suck the solder out of it, and then later I'll come back in and I'll resolder in the new ones. So in an effort just to keep this simple, I'm going to go ahead and just remove all the light bulbs from this, and just do like 1 string at a time. Alright, I want to show you how the solder sucker works. If you haven't used one before, this is a great investment for what, 13 bucks from Radio Shack. Basically, you squeeze the bulb in, you stick it over the joint, you wait until it melts, and you suck. And you see the hole there, that basically is taking the solder out. Now I just squeeze the bulb and it spits it out. Repeat the process. Spit. That plunger one that I bought before, that you gotta, every time you gotta recock that little spring thing, what a pain in the butt. I mean, that was like 7 bucks and this is 13. And look at that. You can just see the wires sitting in there. I can just literally pull this this light bulb right out of there. I spits it out. Kind of like spitting out watermelon seeds. Look at that. Alright, it's almost like a fun toy. You know, I thought this was going to be a real major pain to do this, but this is kind of, makes it a lot less of a pain. Of course, getting it out to this point is a chore, so once you do it, I suggest doing all the bulbs. I've gotten all the bulbs removed from this one. This solder sucker really works well. I just basically put it down like this between a pair of pliers, so you got room for the bulb under there. Use the solder sucker, and you can see the holes. Those are actually, it sucked the solder out clean. Now, if you try and do this just with a regular solder iron to try to move them, chances are you might pull the pad and tear that pad up in there and make it difficult. So now I'm just sticking in one bulb at a time, and just kind of bending the wires over, and then I'll go ahead and solder them all in. I'm just inserting the bulbs now. I just want to let you know this isn't rocket science whatsoever. There's a little plastic holder here, and it's got notches on both sides, so it's kind of almost impossible to screw this up. You just slide the bulb in and insert the little leads in the holes, and you're there. And then once you do that, just kind of snug it all the way down and in. Of course, one-handed isn't as much fun. And then you just bend the leads over on the back side. Alright, so I've got all the bulbs put in. I'm just going to start soldering now. Nothing exciting about that. My solder, I'm just using this pair of pliers to kind of hold it up off the bulb so the bulbs don't touch it down. And on I go. Tequila. I've soldered on all my bulbs. I'm just going to take a pair of wire snippers and snip all the leads and make it nice and clean. Okay, I've got 9 down and 50 to go. On goes with the soldering. Tip here, as I was pushing on a couple of these leads, they were a little bit loose, so I made sure I crimped them down just a tad bit just to make them really snug, because you don't want these things coming loose later, because it's a real pain to go in there and troubleshoot. You want all your lights to work, and you want them to work without a hassle once you replace them. So make sure that those have got a good contact and they're not going to come loose later. As I remove these, I've marked the ones with a little black that didn't work, so I can just trash those. The ones that do work, I just kind of put into a bag here to use for later. One of the little tips I want to pass on is I'm using the solder sucker as I'm sucking to actually bend the tips up, because obviously the leads are bent sideways. And so as I'm sucking the solder, I kind of bend the leads up a bit, so it's just easier just to pull them straight out with my quick tip for you. As I clip the leads off here, these things shoot all over my kitchen. I don't like that, so I crumble up a napkin, and so I shoot the lead. As I clip it, it shoots down and it kind of gets stuck in the napkin, which keeps me from trying to pick these little pieces of wire off the floor. One little quick tip for you. The solder that I'm removing and I'm spitting onto this piece of paper, it's the old lead-based solder, and you know, you don't want kids eating lead-based paint. You don't want them eating lead solder, and this is my kitchen table, so I'm very diligent that I'm only getting solder on here, and I'm going to take and make sure this all gets thrown away, and I wash my hands well and don't eat this solder. Alright, now that I've figured out what I'm doing, I'm going to go ahead and desolder 3 boards at a time and then solder 3 boards at a time, since I've already completed those 2. Save me a little step here. One more tip, use your needle nose pliers when you remove these from the little wires. That way you're holding on to this piece and you're not pulling from the wire itself and possibly making a loose connection later. Anyway, time to desolder. I find it really easy to insert the leads. I just kind of pre-bend them. Obviously they all kind of just come however. So I kind of bend them like that, and then they just fit right into the little holes. Just fit snug in there. Nice. Okay, so I've got these 3 boards with all the new bulbs in, and it's time to start soldering them up. I'm just using some basics lead-free solder here. It's got a little bit of flux in it, and it's just really easy to use, so that's what I'm using. Alright, I finished soldering the last of these boards, so now I'm just going to clip the leads and assemble them back on, and I am now done, and I'll go plug it back in and see if they all work. Alright, so I've now replaced all the light bulbs in here. I'm just going to take this out and plug it into the Mardi Gras and see if they light up. Okay, so it's time to see if what I did worked. Okay, all those are working. These are working. Those are working. And those are working. And these are working. So, they work. I know it's not very exciting to look at now. But if you think about it, you see these ones up here with all the burnout bulbs. That's what I was replacing. So I replaced all the bulbs. And replace these next. And these little white discs you'll see change out here in the next part of this video to something more dramatic, since these are old and faded like white pieces of paper.